On Christmas night, my in-laws demanded a DNA test for my 10-year-old daughter and said it right in front of her. 3 months later, they lost access to a $4.1 million trust and had 90 days to move out of the house they thought was theirs. I am Rowan Caldwell, a risk and compliance director in Chicago, and that was the night I stopped trying to keep the peace and started protecting my child. Chapter 1. Christmas Dinner and the Question That Couldn't Be Taken Back. I used to think the worst thing that could happen at Christmas dinner was overcooked turkey or an awkward political argument. I was wrong. The air inside Denise and Harold Caldwell's house in Naperville felt heavy the moment we stepped in. The tree was perfect, 12 feet tall, professionally decorated in gold and deep red. The dining table was set with her good china, the one she only brought out when she wanted to remind everyone that she once sold half the houses on her block and never let anyone forget it. I am Rowan Caldwell, 39 years old, Director of Risk and Compliance at Harbor Crest Capital in downtown Chicago. I manage regulatory audits and multi-million-dollar exposure reports for a living. I am not easily rattled, but that night, as I helped my 10-year-old daughter Harper take off her coat, I felt something tightening in my chest that had nothing to do with the cold. Michael, my husband of 14 years, was already being pulled toward the kitchen by his father. Harold had that brisk way of giving orders disguised as requests. "Can you give me a hand with the carving?" Michael followed him automatically. Some habits start in childhood and never quite fade. That left me at the doorway of the living room with Harper, facing Denise and my sister-in-law, Tara. Tara's daughter, Madison, was already seated on the rug, surrounded by wrapped gifts that looked like they belonged in a high-end department store display. Harper stood beside me, clutching the small gift bag we had brought for Denise, her fingers tightening around the ribbon. Denise smiled in that tight, polished way she had perfected over decades in real estate. "Harper, sweetheart, you've grown so much." Then she turned to Madison. "Look at you, Maddie. You are getting so tall. You look exactly like your grandmother did at your age." It was subtle. It always was. Madison looked like family. Harper was growing. I felt it, the comparison hanging there like invisible smoke. Dinner moved forward with forced cheerfulness. Harold told a story about a new condo development downtown. Denise asked Madison about her gifted math program. Tara laughed too loudly at everything her daughter said. Harper answered questions politely when spoken to. She has always been observant. She notices who gets interrupted and who does not. When it came time for gifts, the difference was impossible to ignore. Madison unwrapped a new tablet, designer sneakers, a stack of gift cards. Harper opened a set of sketch pads and a sweater that looked like it came from a clearance rack. It was not the price that hurt. It was the message: practical, safe, minimal. Denise watched Madison with open pride. "That girl is brilliant," she said. "She definitely takes after the Caldwell side." Harper glanced at me for half a second. I smiled at her, steady and calm. I have trained myself to keep my expression neutral under pressure. It is useful in my line of work. It is harder when your child is being measured and found wanting in front of you. Michael disappeared into the kitchen again to help Harold with the dishes. The moment the men were out of the room, something shifted. The warmth drained out of Denise's voice. Harold cleared his throat from the doorway between the kitchen and dining room. He did not sit back down. He stayed standing, hands braced on the back of a chair like he was about to deliver a business update. "We need to talk about something before the new year," he said. Harper looked up at him, fork halfway to her mouth. Denise folded her napkin carefully. "It's about being transparent as a family." I felt my spine straighten. Years in corporate compliance have given me a radar for loaded language. Harold looked directly at Harper, not at me. "Before we go any further with estate matters, we think it would be best to have a DNA test done." The room went still. The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen. Madison stopped chewing. Harper blinked. I saw the confusion first, then the slow tightening around her eyes. Denise leaned forward, her voice syrupy. We just want to make sure everything is clear. We need to be certain she is truly a Caldwell before we talk about inheritance or trusts." The word inheritance landed like a stone. I felt heat rise behind my ears, not because of the accusation, but because of where it was aimed, at a 10-year-old girl sitting in her holiday dress, still holding a fork. Harold continued, as if discussing tax planning. "You understand, Rowan, these things matter. Blood matters." I placed my hand on Harper's knee under the table. Her leg was trembling. Inside me, something cold settled into place. Not panic, not outrage, precision. "If that is what you need, then we can do that," I said evenly. Denise blinked, surprised. I did not give her the reaction she expected. Tara shifted in her seat. For a split second, I caught the faint glow of a phone angled towards us from her lap. She thought she was subtle. She was not. She was recording. Harold nodded, satisfied. "Good. That will put this to rest." Harper lowered her eyes to her plate. She did not cry. She did not argue. She shrank. That was worse. At that exact moment, Michael walked back into the room with a dish towel slung over his shoulder. "What are we putting to rest?" Silence. Denise looked at Harold. Harold looked at me. "They think we should do a DNA test," I said calmly, "before discussing inheritance." Michael went very still, the kind of still that's more dangerous than shouting. "You said that to her?" he asked quietly. Denise straightened. "We said it to the family. Don't make this dramatic. If there's nothing to hide, why would anyone object?" Michael's jaw flexed. "You don't question my daughter's place in this family. Not in front of her, not ever." Tara shifted again, still holding her phone. I made a mental note. I stood up slowly. "Harper, get your coat." She moved immediately, grateful for the instruction. As we walked toward the door, Denise called after us. "If you refuse, that tells us everything we need to know." I did not turn around. "We'll schedule it," I said over my shoulder. "You will have your clarity." Outside, the December air cut sharp and clean against my face. Michael buckled Harper into the back seat. He shut the door harder than necessary. We drove in silence for several minutes. The lights of Naperville blurred past the windows. From the back seat, a small voice broke through. "Mom?" "Yes, baby?" "If I don't look like Daddy enough, does that mean I'm not really his?" My breath caught. Michael's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "You are his daughter," I said carefully. "No test changes that." She hesitated. "But they think it does." I turned in my seat to look at her. "They're wrong." She nodded, but her eyes were wet now. She stared down her hands. "I have spent years navigating regulatory risk, fraud exposure, compliance breaches. I know what a real threat looks like." That night, I realized the threat was not a test. It was the idea planted in my daughter's mind that she had to prove she belonged. The DNA test was not about science. It was about control, about money, about who gets to decide who is family. As we merged onto the highway toward Chicago, I felt the shift. Something had changed. A line had been crossed, and it could not be uncrossed. In the rearview mirror, Harper wiped her cheeks quietly, thinking we couldn't see. That was the moment I understood this was never going to be just a conversation at a holiday table. It was the beginning of something much bigger and much colder than any of them expected.
Chapter 2. The Will, the Money, and the Real Motive. Michael did not speak again until we were halfway back to Chicago. The highway was mostly empty, the city lights growing brighter ahead of us. "There is something you need to know," he said finally. I kept my eyes on the road in front of us. "I am listening." "Grandma has been talking to a lawyer about her estate plan. She mentioned it to me a few months ago. She said she was reviewing everything before the end of the year." I felt my pulse slow in a very deliberate way. "What kind of review?" "She has a trust. She set it up in 2019. It is revocable. She can change it whenever she wants." I knew enough about estate structures to understand what that meant. Revocable meant flexible, rewritable, temporary in a sense. "How much are we talking about?" I asked. Michael exhaled. Around 4.1 million, the house in Oak Park, 2 rental properties, and her investment accounts. She said she wanted it structured cleanly so there would not be any fighting later. Any fighting later? I glanced at him. Did she say anything about Harper? He hesitated. She said she wanted to leave something directly to her, not just through me, something that was hers alone. There it was. The pieces clicked together with unsettling clarity. Denise had not suddenly developed a concern about genetic purity. She had sensed a shift in money. When did she find out? I asked. About Harper being included? Around Thanksgiving. Mom overheard Grandma talking about it on the phone. And that is when this DNA idea started, I said quietly. Michael nodded once. Harper had fallen asleep in the back seat, her head tilted against the window. The streetlights flickered across her face as we drove. By the time we pulled into our driveway in Lincoln Park, my mind was no longer on the insult at the table. It was on leverage. Denise did not want clarity. She wanted control. The next morning, Michael called his grandmother. Eleanor Caldwell was 94, sharp as a blade, and more observant than anyone gave her credit for. She asked us to come see her the day after Christmas at her lawyer's office downtown. Victor Stein's office sat on the 18th floor of a building overlooking the Chicago River. Floor-to-ceiling windows, dark wood conference table, discreet holiday wreath on the door. It smelled faintly of coffee and paper. Eleanor was already seated when we walked in, wrapped in a navy wool coat that probably cost more than my first car. Her white hair was perfectly set, her eyes clear and steady. Harper stayed home with a neighbor. I did not want her sitting through another adult conversation about her worth. Victor Stein, mid-50s, wire-rimmed glasses, calm voice, shook our hands and closed the door. "I assume this has something to do with Christmas dinner," he said gently. Eleanor's mouth tightened. I was told what was said. Michael sat down beside me. They asked for a DNA test in front of Harper. Eleanor's hand tightened on the edge of the table. That child has done nothing but show kindness in this family. Victor opened a leather folder. Mrs. Caldwell established a revocable living trust in 2019. At the time, the primary beneficiaries were Michael and Denise in equal shares with contingent provisions for grandchildren. I watched Eleanor as she spoke. Her expression did not change. Over the last several months, she has requested adjustments. She is considering reallocating her assets. Considering, I repeated silently. Victor continued in the same steady tone. A revocable trust means Mrs. Caldwell can modify or revoke it at any time. If she chooses to convert it to an irrevocable trust, the terms become fixed. The beneficiaries would be locked in. After that, changes would require consent from all beneficiaries, which in practice is extremely difficult. I understood the mechanics. Once irrevocable, Denise would have no say. Eleanor looked directly at me. "I have been watching your mother-in-law for years, Rowan. The way she measures affection, the way she counts what she thinks is owed to her." She turned to Michael. "Your mother has always believed blood entitles her to everything." Michael stared down at his hands. "I wanted to leave something to Harper directly," Eleanor said. "A trust in her name, education, a down payment someday, something secure." When Denise heard that, she said it was irresponsible to leave money to a child who might not even belong to the family. The words sounded even uglier in that quiet office. Victor folded his hands. "Legally speaking, Mrs. Caldwell can allocate her assets however she chooses. No one has a right to inherit anything until she passes, and even then only according to the trust." "So the DNA test," I said, "it has nothing to do with certainty, it has to do with disqualification." Eleanor nodded once. "They want an excuse to exclude her." Michael looked up sharply. "So what are you going to do?" Eleanor's gaze did not waver. "I am prepared to convert the trust to irrevocable and divide the estate equally between you and Harper. Denise will receive nothing further beyond what she has already benefited from during my lifetime." The air shifted. "Are you sure?" Michael asked. "She's still your daughter." "She is my daughter," Eleanor replied evenly, "and I have tolerated her greed for decades, but I will not tolerate cruelty toward a child." Victor slid a document toward her. "The conversion paperwork is prepared. I was waiting for your final confirmation." Eleanor rested her hand on the pen, but did not pick it up yet. "If Denise apologizes to Harper sincerely and retracts this demand, I will reconsider, but if she does not, I will sign this before the end of the year." Michael swallowed. She will not apologize. I believed him. That afternoon, my phone lit up with Denise's name. I stepped into our kitchen to answer. "I heard you went running to Grandma. You think you can turn her against her own daughter?" I kept my voice level. "We did not turn anyone against anyone. You asked for a DNA test in front of my child. If there's nothing to hide, you should welcome it, or are you afraid of what it might show?" Afraid was not the word I would use. I ended the call without escalating. Then I saved the voicemail she left an hour later, and the next one. I forwarded them to a private folder in my email, labeled December. At Harbor Crest Capital, we document everything. Risk management begins with records. That evening, curiosity led me somewhere I hadn't looked before. Tara's boutique had been struggling since the pandemic. I knew that much. But public records told a clearer story. A business loan taken out in 2021, a second line of credit in 2023, credit liens filed this fall, $96,000 in revolving debt. The loan maturity date listed March 2026. Money reveals character. I'd seen it play out in corporate fraud investigations more times than I could count. Desperation reshapes morality. 2 days later, December 28th, we were back in Victor's office. Eleanor did not waste time. "There has been no apology," she said. "Only accusations." She picked up the pen this time. Victor reviewed the final terms once more for the record. "Upon execution, the Caldwell Family Trust will become irrevocable, 50% allocated to Michael Caldwell, 50% allocated to Harper Caldwell in a separate subtrust managed until age 30. Denise Caldwell and Harold Caldwell removed as residual beneficiaries." I watched Eleanor as she spoke. Her expression did not change. Denise found out that evening when Victor's office sent formal notice to all previously listed beneficiaries. The email was brief and factual. My phone rang within minutes. "You went behind my back," Denise said, her voice sharp and shaking. "No," I replied. "You did that at Christmas dinner. You have manipulated a 94-year-old woman. She made her decision based on what she witnessed." There was silence on the other end, then a shift in tone. "This is not over." I did not respond. I did not need to, because for the first time since that night at the dinner table, the ground had shifted under her feet, and she knew it.
Chapter 3. Boundaries and Manipulation. Denise did not waste time proving that. The first week of January felt deceptively calm. Harbor Crest Capital was easing back into the new year, compliance reports stacking up on my desk, regulatory updates rolling in. I almost convinced myself that the worst of it had passed. Then my phone rang at 3:20 on a Thursday afternoon. It was Lincoln Park Elementary. "Hi, Mrs. Caldwell," the receptionist said in a cheerful tone that did not match the words that followed. "I just wanted to confirm that Harper was picked up early today by her grandmother." My body went cold. "Which grandmother?" "Denise Caldwell. She said there was a family matter." I closed my office door without thinking. "She picked her up." "Yes, ma'am. She is still listed as an authorized guardian on the 2022 form." The 2022 form. Before the trust, before Christmas, before the line was drawn. I thanked the receptionist in a voice that sounded strangely calm even to me, then called Michael. "They have Harper," I said. "Your mother picked her from school." There was a pause on the other end, then a sharp intake of breath. "I am leaving the site now. I will meet you there." The drive to Naperville felt longer than it ever had. Traffic on the Eisenhower crawled. My thoughts did not. This was not about babysitting. This was about leverage. When I pulled into Denise and Harold's driveway, I did not slam the car door. I did not rush. I walked to the front door and rang the bell. Denise opened it with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Rowan, we were just spending time with our granddaughter." "You mean the granddaughter you needed DNA proof for?" I said evenly.
She stepped aside as if inviting me into a showroom. The living room was scattered with shopping bags from Oak Brook Center. A new gaming console sat on the coffee table. A designer backpack leaned against the couch. Harper was sitting stiffly beside Harold, clutching a large stuffed bear. Her eyes went straight to mine. "Mom." I crossed the room and crouched in front of her. "Are you okay?" She nodded, but she did not look okay. Denise folded her arms. "We just thought she deserved something special after all this tension. We are trying to make things right." "By buying her silence?" I asked. Her jaw tightened. "Do not twist this. We are her grandparents." Michael walked in behind me, breath slightly uneven from the drive. "What exactly do you think you are doing?" Harold stood. "We picked up our granddaughter from school. Perfectly legal." That word hung in the air. I straightened slowly. "You are still on the old guardian form." "Of course we are," Denise said. "You never removed us." The implication was clear. If she wanted to push it, she could argue she had every right. Michael stepped forward. "You crossed a line at Christmas. This makes it worse." Denise's voice sharpened. "We're compensating for the hostility you have shown us. You think cutting us out of a trust makes you powerful?" Harper's voice was small but steady. "I want to go home." Everything stopped. Denise looked at her, then at me. "We are only trying to show her love." "Love does not come with conditions," I said. Michael placed a hand on Harper's shoulder. "Get your coat, kiddo." Denise's smile vanished. "If you walk out without these gifts, you are telling her we do not matter." Harper slipped her hand into mine. "I do not want them." That was the moment control shifted. We left the bags and the console on the floor. In the car, Harper stared straight ahead. "Are you mad at me?" she asked quietly. "For what? For not wanting to stay?" I felt something break open inside me. "No, I'm proud of you." She nodded, but I could see she was carrying something heavier than toys. That night, I logged into the school portal and removed Denise and Harold from the authorized pickup list. I emailed the principal and requested confirmation in writing. The next morning, I met with Principal Alvarez in her office. She was apologetic but firm. "We operate on the forms provided," she said. "If a grandparent is listed and presents identification, we release the child." "I understand," I replied. "That will not happen again." We updated everything effective immediately. A note was added to Harper's file requiring direct parental authorization for any early pickup. As I walked out of the building, my phone buzzed again. Tara had posted something publicly. "Sometimes the truth is uncomfortable, but transparency matters in families, especially when inheritance is involved." The comments section was already filling up with vague sympathy and speculation. I closed the app and reopened it twice before forcing myself to stop. By lunchtime, Rachel from compliance leaned into my office. "Is everything okay?" she asked gently. "I saw something on Facebook." I kept my expression neutral. "Family disagreement, nothing that requires HR." She nodded, but her eyes were curious. That evening at church, a woman I barely knew asked if everything was all right with Michael's side of the family. News travels quickly in suburban networks, faster than facts. Denise called twice that night. I did not answer. She left a voicemail. "You cannot erase us from her life. You are making this ugly." I saved the message. The pattern was clear. If she could not control the money, she would attempt to control the narrative. If she could not control the narrative, she would attempt to control access. The guardian form had been a loophole, a technicality. In my line of work, technicalities are risk exposure. The following day, I met with a private attorney recommended by a colleague. His office was smaller than Victor Stein's, but no less precise. "I want a cease and desist drafted. Defamation, harassment, and unauthorized contact with my minor child." He listened carefully, taking notes. "Do you intend to proceed with the DNA test?" he asked. "Yes," I said, "on our terms." "Because you doubt?" "No, because I want this weapon taken off the table permanently." He nodded. "That is often the cleanest path." The letter was sent by certified mail that Friday. That weekend, Harper asked me something I had not anticipated. "If the test says I'm dad's, will they stop?" I sat beside her on her bed. They will have to. And if it says I'm not? I held her face gently. It won't say that. And even if it did, nothing about who you are changes. She searched my face for cracks. I did not let her see any. By the end of January, the school had implemented a stricter early release policy. Principal Alvarez emailed to confirm that all guardians now required same-day parental verification, regardless of previous authorization. Denise's calls became less frequent. Tara's posts grew more cryptic. Money had exposed something ugly, but boundaries were exposing something even more uncomfortable. They no longer had access to what they believed they were entitled to, and I understood something with complete clarity. This was not about vengeance, it was about containment. The DNA test appointment was scheduled the following week at a certified lab in downtown Chicago. I chose the earliest available slot. If they wanted proof, they were going to get it, but they were not going to get anything else. And for the first time since Christmas, I felt steady again.
Chapter 4. The Truth on Paper. The lab was colder than I expected, not emotionally, physically. Bright white walls, glass partitions, a quiet waiting area with a muted television looping health insurance commercials. The sign on the counter read, Certified DNA Diagnostics of Illinois. Everything about the place was clinical and neutral. No judgment, no family politics, just procedures. Harper sat between Michael and me, swinging her legs slightly under the chair. "Is this going to hurt?" she asked. "Just a cheek swab," I said. "It will feel like brushing your teeth from the inside." Michael forced a smile. "See? Easy." He sounded steady, but I knew him. His jaw was set too tight. His knee bounced once before he stopped himself. The nurse called our names. The swabs were quick. Paperwork was longer. Signatures verifying chain of custody, identification checks, confirmation that results would be delivered directly to the requesting party. 10 business days, the technician said. 10 days. It felt absurd that something so small could stretch time that long. In the elevator down to the parking garage, Michael finally spoke. "I hate that we are doing this." "I know. It feels like I am validating what they said." "You are not," I replied. "You are closing the door." He nodded, but did not look convinced. Over the next week, everything looked normal on the surface. I went to work, Harper went to school, Michael returned to his construction site in Schaumburg. Compliance reports, budget meetings, ordinary life. Underneath it all was a quiet tension. One night after Harper went to bed, Michael sat across from me at the kitchen table. "What if they twist this anyway?" he asked. "They cannot twist numbers," I said. He ran a hand through his hair. "It's not about numbers, it's about pride, about what they think of me." "You mean what they think they own," I corrected. He looked at me, and for a second I saw the boy who had grown up trying to earn approval that was never freely given. "I do not want my daughter growing up feeling like she has to prove herself to anyone," he said. "She will not," I said. "Not if we keep doing this the right way." On the other side of town, Denise and Harold were moving differently. I did not know all of it at first, but information travels in layers. Victor called me 3 days into our reading period. "I thought you should be aware," he said, "that your in-laws have consulted separate counsel. Richard Lowell, a local estate attorney with a reputation for blunt assessments." "And?" I asked. "And he informed them they have no standing to challenge Mrs. Caldwell's trust. The Oak Park property and all associated assets are legally held by the trust. Denise and Harold do not own the Naperville home outright. It was transferred into the trust in 2019. I leaned back in my office chair. "They know this now?" "Yes, and I am told Mr. Lowell also advised them to cease any public statements regarding the child's parentage. He mentioned potential defamation exposure." For a moment, I allowed myself to breathe more fully. "So they have been told to stop." "Legally, yes. Emotionally, I suspected that was another matter." That same afternoon, Tara's boutique posted a vague announcement about restructuring and financial reevaluation. I had not been looking for it. Rachel sent it to me. "Is this related?" she asked. "Probably," I replied. A quick search confirmed what I had already suspected. The refinancing application Tara submitted in late November had been denied. The projected inheritance she hinted at in her financial disclosures had been listed as contingent future asset. With the trust now irrevocable, that projection evaporated. Banks do not like uncertainty. Money reveals character. It also reveals fragility. Day 9 arrived without ceremony. I checked my email more than I wanted to admit. On day 10, just before noon, the notification came through. Certified DNA Diagnostics has released your results. My heart did not race. It slowed. I forwarded the email to Michael and closed my office door. We opened it together that evening at our dining table. Harper was upstairs finishing homework. I wanted this moment quiet. Michael's hands hovered over the laptop keyboard. "You open it," he said. I clicked. The report loaded in black and white. Names, dates, identification numbers. Probability of paternity greater than 99.99%. There it was. Clinical, absolute. Michael exhaled slowly. I did not realize I had been holding my breath until that moment. "I knew it," he said softly. "I always knew it." I reached across the table and took his hand. "We are done proving anything." He nodded. We printed 3 copies, one for our records, one for our attorney, one for Victor to have on file. The next morning, our attorney sent a formal letter attaching the certified results and reiterating the cease and desist terms. Clear, direct, no emotion. Denise's response came within hours. The first voicemail was short and sharp. "So this is how you want to handle it, through lawyers." The second one was different. "Rowan, I never meant to hurt Harper. You know that. We were just asking a question." The shift in tone was almost clinical in itself. By the third voicemail, her voice cracked. "You didn't have to involve attorneys. We could have talked about this." I listened to each message without reacting. Harold did not call. That silence was louder. Later that week, Michael received a brief text from his father. "We met with counsel. This is unnecessary escalation." Michael showed it to me. "Escalation," I repeated, as if demanding a DNA test at Christmas dinner had been subtle. Meanwhile, Tara's situation deteriorated quietly. The boutique announced a clearance sale. A rumor circulated that a line of credit had been frozen. Denise was seen meeting with a mortgage broker in Naperville. Pieces were shifting. One evening, Harper came into the kitchen when Michael and I were reviewing paperwork. "Did it come back?" she asked. "Yes," I said gently. "It did." "And?" "And it says exactly what we already knew." She watched my face carefully. "You are Dad's daughter, on paper and in every other way." She smiled then, small but real. "Can I tell Grandma Eleanor?" "Yes," Michael said. "I think she would like that." After Harper went upstairs to call her great-grandmother, Michael leaned back against the counter. "It shouldn't have taken a lab report for this to feel settled," he said. It did not. It just removed their last excuse. For the first time since Christmas, there was no accusation hanging in the air, no technicality left to exploit. There was just paper, ink, numbers, and the sound of the voicemail notification lighting up again on my phone, softer now, almost uncertain.
Chapter 5. The Price of Control. The messages stopped sounding angry and started sounding afraid. March arrived with a gray sky and a certified letter. Victor called first, then sent formal documentation. "The Naperville property is being listed for sale," he said calmly. "The trust requires asset reallocation. 90-day notice has been issued to current occupants." Current occupants. Denise and Harold. I pictured the house in Naperville, the manicured lawn, the dining room where Harper had been told she might not belong, the place Denise had treated like inherited territory. It was never hers outright. Eleanor had transferred it into the trust in 2019 for tax efficiency and long-term planning. Denise had always spoken about it as if ownership were implied. Implied does not survive paperwork. Michael read the notice twice. "So they have 90 days?" he said quietly. "Yes." He did not smile. He did not look triumphant. He looked tired. That evening, Denise called again. I answered this time. "You are forcing us out of our home," she said, her voice sharp but thinner than before. "No," I replied. "The trust is restructuring assets. You think hiding behind legal language makes this clean. I am not hiding." She inhaled sharply. "Your grandmother is being manipulated." Before I could answer, another voice entered the call. It was Eleanor. "Denise, that is enough." There was a pause. "Mother, you cannot seriously be doing this." "I am doing what I should have done years ago," Eleanor said evenly. "I have watched how you measure affection. I have watched how you reward compliance and punish difference. You are choosing her over your own daughter. I am choosing fairness over entitlement." The call ended without resolution. 2 days later, Michael went to see his parents alone. When he returned, he stood in the doorway of our kitchen for a long time before speaking. Dad admitted something. "What?" "They were afraid," he said, "afraid of losing control, afraid that if Harper had her own share, they would not be able to influence how the money was used." "Control," I repeated. He nodded. He said Mom has always believed family assets should stay under her oversight, that dividing them weakens the family. "Or weakens her," I said. Michael gave a small, humorless laugh. Harold had also been informed that his position as a volunteer advisory member at the local community bank was under review. It was not directly connected to the trust, but rumors travel in tight circles. A man at church had asked Denise after Sunday service if the DNA test had really been necessary. She had not expected that. Tara's boutique closed at the end of March, a final clearance sale, handmade signage, no dramatic announcement, just empty racks and a paper sign in the window thanking customers for their support. Financial pressure has a way of stripping away theatrics. One afternoon in April, Harper and I drove to Oak Park to visit Eleanor. Her house smelled like old books and lemon polish. Sunlight poured through tall windows onto polished wood floors. Harper walked in more confidently than she had since Christmas. Eleanor reached for her immediately. "Come here, sweetheart." Harper climbed onto the sofa beside her. "I heard about the test," Eleanor said softly. Harper nodded. "It says I am a Caldwell." Eleanor smiled gently. "You were a Caldwell before any test. Family is not proven in a lab. It is proven in who stands up for you." Harper looked at me, then back at her great-grandmother. "They said I might not belong." Eleanor's eyes sharpened. "Belonging is not something anyone gets to revoke. Not me, not your grandmother, not anyone." Harper leaned into her side. For the first time in months, I saw her shoulders fully relax. On the drive home, she talked about a science project at school, about a friend's birthday party, about ordinary 10-year-old things. Ordinary felt extraordinary. By May, a for sale sign stood in the Naperville yard. Neighbors whispered, some avoided eye contact, others offered tight smiles. Denise had always curated perception carefully. Now, perception was slipping beyond her control. Michael received another message from his father. "We will find somewhere smaller." It was the closest Harold had come to acknowledging the shift. The closing date was set for early June. We did not attend. We were not required to. The trust handled the transaction through Victor's office. Still, I drove past once, alone. The driveway was empty, the curtains drawn back. The house looked smaller without Denise standing in the doorway. Control often disguises itself as stability. When it cracks, the structure underneath can feel startlingly fragile. That night, Harper asked if we would ever have to leave our house. "No," I said, "this is ours." Owned outright, no hidden clauses, no inherited leverage. Michael stood beside me as we tucked her in. "Dad," she said quietly, "are you mad at Grandma?" He hesitated. "I am disappointed, but I am not confused anymore." That seemed to satisfy her. Later, when the house was quiet, Michael and I sat on the couch without speaking. "This did not have to happen," he said eventually. "No," I replied, "it did not. But sometimes consequences are not punishments, they are corrections." Outside, the city hummed softly. Inside, there was no more tension waiting to explode. Denise and Harold moved out in mid-June. No announcement, no dramatic confrontation, just a rented truck and a quieter street. The cost of control had finally come due, and for once, it was not being paid by a 10-year-old girl.
Chapter 6: Boundaries and Peace. Life did not explode after they moved out. It quieted. By September of 2026, the trust had fully reallocated the proceeds from the Naperville sale. Victor confirmed everything in writing. The Oak Park property remained in place. The rental units were consolidated under a revised investment structure. Harper's subtrust sat in a managed account under clear parameters, untouched and secure. Michael no longer sent monthly transfers to his parents. That ritual ended without ceremony. No confrontation, no announcement, just the absence of a scheduled payment. At first, the silence felt unnatural. For years, there had been some level of tension humming in the background. A phone call waiting to disrupt dinner, a holiday invitation layered with expectation, a comment that required strategic patience. Now, there was space. Space can feel unfamiliar when you are used to defending yourself. Michael suggested we start counseling, not because we were fractured, but because we had been under strain longer than we admitted. We met every other Tuesday evening with a therapist in River North. Soft lighting, neutral carpet, no religious overtones, just structured conversation. The first session, Michael said something I had not heard him articulate before. I grew up believing love meant access. If my parents had access to me, to my time, to my decisions, that meant everything was fine. And now? Now I understand access is not the same thing as trust. The therapist nodded gently. "And what does trust look like to you now?" Michael looked at me. "It looks like protecting my daughter before protecting anyone's feelings." That sentence stayed with me. Harper did not need therapy, she needed consistency. We gave her that. Soccer practice, homework at the kitchen island, Friday movie nights with popcorn in bowls too big for her hands. One evening, she came home from school and announced she had corrected a classmate who said, "You have to look like your parents to really be their kid." "What did you say?" I asked. "I said you just have to belong where people treat you like you matter." I did not correct her wording. At church, the energy shifted slowly. People who had once looked at me with curiosity now looked at Denise with cautious distance. I overheard fragments of conversations in the foyer. Was the test really necessary? I heard they lost the house. Harold stopped volunteering at the community bank. Officially, he stepped down to focus on family matters. Unofficially, no one wanted quiet controversy attached to a public-facing advisory role. Denise attended service less frequently. When she did, she kept her eyes forward. I did not take pleasure in that. Karma does not need celebration. It simply arrives. In October, my phone rang with a number I recognized. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hello?" There was a long pause on the other end. Then Denise's voice, smaller than I had ever heard it. "I was wrong." The words landed without drama. I waited. "I should not have said those things about Harper." "You should not have," I agreed. Another pause. "I let fear dictate my choices," she said. "I thought I was protecting what was ours." "What was yours was never at risk from a child," I replied. Her breathing shifted, uneven. "I do not expect things to go back to how they were." "They will not," I said, calmly. "So what happens now?" "We need distance," I answered. "Real distance. No surprise visits, no social media comments, no undermining." Silence stretched between us.
"I can respect that," she said quietly. "I hope you do." We ended the call without promises. When I told Michael, he did not look relieved. He looked resolved. "It does not erase what happened," he said. "No, but it clarifies it." Thanksgiving came and went quietly that year. We spent it with friends in Lincoln Park. Harper laughed without glancing over her shoulder. Michael carved the turkey in our kitchen, steady and unhurried. Later that night, after dishes were done and Harper was asleep, I stood at the window looking out at the streetlights. This was not revenge. Revenge would have required spectacle. What we did was draw a line. There is a difference. I used to believe boundaries were aggressive, that drawing them would fracture relationships beyond repair. Now I understand something different. Boundaries are not punishments, they are definitions. They define who has access to you, who speaks into your child's life, who gets to leverage money as a weapon. Family is not DNA. DNA can be tested, printed, filed away in a folder. Family is who stands up when someone tries to reduce a child to a technicality. 3 months after the closing, Harper asked me something when we were walking home from school. "Are Grandma and Grandpa still mad?" "Maybe," I said, "but that's their work to do." "Are you mad?" I thought about it. "No, I am clear." She nodded as if that made perfect sense. Clarity feels quieter than anger. It does not spike your pulse. It does not demand attention. It simply sits where chaos used to live. If you have ever faced a moment where someone tried to question your child's place in your own family, you know how quickly things can unravel, and you know how hard it is to decide when enough is enough. So I will leave you with this. When money starts to twist loyalty, when pride disguises itself as principle, when a child is asked to prove she belongs, is drawing a firm boundary the only way to protect what matters? Or is there another way to hold a family together without sacrificing the ones who are most vulnerable? That's a question I did not ask lightly. It's one I live with calmly now.